Hey, how's it going? So, I decided to make a Fribbels Optimizer guide here, and let me just brush through the basics on how to get Fribbels Optimizer so that you can start getting worked on this and getting all your characters in there, all your gear, and really start learning about how to gear them efficiently and fast. So, first of all, you need to go to this. I'll it in the description below. But you'll download it from here, and there's a little installation guide here for getting started, and you're going to need to install Java 8 and you need to set up the auto importer. This will make it a million times easier than not having it. If you don't have the auto importer, you'll have to take screenshots of all your gear, etc. It can be a real pain in the ass, honestly. So I'd highly recommend setting this up. And some of you may say, well, I already have Java installed, so I don't need to do this, but I'd recommend reinstalling it because I believe for me and a lot of other people, they had to reinstall it to actually make it work. So yeah, I'd highly recommend it. So then you get on over to the importer. So I'd recommend doing heroes and gear automatically rather than just gear automatically. This will add in all your gear. If you do heroes and gear automatically, you can actually make it so it attaches all of your gear onto your characters and you have all that set up in your optimizer as well. And you can also set a couple options. So you could make it so it imports every single 6-star character you have or only characters you already have in there. So I only did characters I already have in there. So let's say like if I added Inos and Ines and stuff like that, it'll add them in and all the gear on them, as opposed to every single character in my entire account. There's a lot of characters just holding gear. It's not exactly worth it. So secondly, you also want to choose what level of gear you want to add in. So I usually do 12 and up. Um, I think if you add in every piece of gear, it'd be too much. And also plus 15, sometimes you might have some plus 12 gear that you don't really realize is actually decent, and the optimizer can pick up and say, hey, this is actually pretty good, and you might want to upgrade it, and it'll be good on this character. So that's what I would recommend. So then you have to go to your game, and you close it. Then you have to hit Start Scanning. Gotta click on this, and then we wait for the game to open. All right, so we're in the game. Now we just gotta hit Stop Scan. And it should, there we go. So finish scanning 742 items. So then once you've scanned all that stuff, you got to export it. You want to save it in here. And then you merge data. I don't need to merge the data, but that'll add everything in, and you'll have all of your characters, all of your gear. Everything's going to be set up nice and simple, right? And you'll notice that when you're in Fribbels Optimizer here, just looking around your characters, this is all the gear that's on my Charlotte, for instance. Not good gear for her, mind you, but I'm actually going to be re-gearing her here in just a second. But this is just showing what you have available. It tells you the gear score of all the items, so this can be an easy way to look at the different gear scores of your items. Some items might be better than you ever expected them to be. And also it shows what they look like when they're reforged. So this item, for instance, is only 51 gear score, but it becomes 61. Um, Also, what's really useful about Fribbles is just there's lots of items you'll have that are unreforged, and some of them you may not realize are actually pretty good. So Fribbles can really help you find those items that you originally never would have really expected to use, and you'll see that they're actually really good and how they fit with your other items on your account. Something that's really useful about Fribbles Optimizer is the fact that you can be very efficient with your gear compared to just doing it by hand. You can make it so that characters can fit together pieces of gear that originally wouldn't have really thought would fit together and maybe might look less efficient at first, but turn out to be really good sets of gear for specific characters, which can therefore then free up gear for other characters. So you can basically gear up a grand total larger amount of characters than before. So we've got all our gear here. You know, you can look at different things like the score. This tells you the gear score, so my highest is 79 here on my Una. B score tells you damage score, so it's looking at crit chance, crit damage, speed, attack, etc. S score here is looking for like defensive stats. So as you can see here, defense, effect resist, speed, health, that kind of stuff, right? So there's different scoring because if you have a character that has really high gear score items, but all of their items are a mixture of different stats that don't really work together, so you have like effectiveness and crit damage and health percent and it's all over the place, it doesn't really matter that they're high gear score if, they don't really work well in the character. So now we get to building a character. So you're going to see a lot of stuff here and it looks kind of confusing, but it's actually relatively simple. So I'll go over it real quick. So this is saving some of the stuff from when I was messing around on Charlotte before, but let me just walk through real quick. So you can always put your cursor over here to get reminded about what this stuff is, but let me talk about the basics and how this can be used to build your characters. So use Reforged Stats. I recommend always having this on. This makes it so when you look through your characters, it will, or you look through the variations of gear that you can use for your character, that it'll look to see if the item can be reforged and if it will fit in with the rest of the gear. This is really helpful. So I highly recommend having that on unless you refuse to reforge anything that you have, I guess. Using hero priority. Now this is something that's actually pretty useful. Although I don't use it, I do a different method. But as you can see right here, there's the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And you can actually grab this and you can drag them. So Briar Witch's right now cannot find gear that is on these characters above her. The hero priority thing makes it so that any character that is above them in the order, so anyone above 5 in this case, you can't take the gear off of them when you're looking for gear. So this can make it so you want to build your characters in order of importance. You can have them all in a line like this. So that makes it so that you're not accidentally taking anything off, especially when you're looking at all gear that are locked or equipped like this. However, I generally use this where I say, oh, I don't want to take gear off of, let's say, Ross and Angelic Montmorency and Designer Lilibet, something like that, right? This is another method where you check off all the characters you don't want to take gear off of. However, hero priority is also a really good way of doing it. Either way works to make it so once you're done building a character, you're not just taking gear off of them with the next character. So then use substat mods is something useful for if you want to add substat modification gems, although I haven't messed around with this too much, to be honest, and I think it's a little confusing, but you can add in, let's say you have a speed set crit damage modification gem, and now it'll look through your gear and see which pieces of gear could be changed to have that, and if it would fit in with the rest of your gear. So that's a whole extra step basically involved, and it can definitely be useful, but I think it's a lot of extra work, and generally you're going to be looking at your really good gear anyway and using these substat modification gems, so I feel like overall it doesn't really change too much. Locked and equipped items, so when you equip an item to a character, you can lock it to like just indicate that you want to keep that item on that character, so this will look at items that are locked on characters, and then equipped also is kind of a similar thing, just if the items are equipped to a character. So if you turn all these off, then it means only items that are unlocked and not equipped to a character you're going to be looking for. And then keep current is let's say you have 3 items on Charlotte right now. You have like helm, boots, and a neck or something. Keep current will look for all variations of gear where you have those 3 pieces of gear, and it'll look for 3 other pieces to slot in to make the build that you're looking for. Now we get to this. So something important here is stat filters and rating filters go hand in hand and are very important. So you could just put stats in and say, like, I want at least 3,500 attack on my Charlotte, and I want at least, I don't know, 1,400 defense on my Charlotte. But the thing is, you don't always want to do that. So let's say you have a build that you could find, possibly, that has 3,400 attack, but it has really high crit damage. So if you put in this limiter of 3,500 attack, you would never be able to find that build that could potentially be better than other ones you could find. So you don't always want to just limit yourself with these kinds of things unless it's a specific stat breakpoint that you're looking for. So in this case, I'm not going to have any of these. I think I'm going to delete all of them, actually. And I'm only going to have speed because this is something separate, right? And we don't really have to deal with crit rate because Charlotte doesn't need it, but for most characters I put 100 or at least like 98, 99, something like that. And we don't want to put crit damage either here. There's no stat breakpoints specifically we're looking for, right? What matters here is the rating filters. So this will give you a whole wall of text talking about all of them, but here's the important ones I'm going to go over. So EHP is your effective health that you're looking for in your character. And so if you look at this number 80,000 I had before, that's not really going to mean much to you. And, to be honest, it doesn't mean a whole lot for me either. I use trial and error for this usually, as I put in a number that, I've dealt a lot with Fribbels Optimizer, so 80,000 is a number that's reasonable to me. But usually when you're messing around with your character, you will kind of have to lowball a little bit at first and then kind of work your way up. And I'll show you in a second how that works. But EHP is your effective health based on your health and defense. So by doing it this way, it makes it so that we can not look for specific defense and health. So maybe one build will have really high health but lower defense, or it'll have really low health but really high defense. You know, we don't usually want it to be too much on one side or the other, but want to look for a middle ground. However, EHP is just the most important stat to look for because otherwise you might miss some builds that you otherwise wouldn't find. Then we got McD. So McD is actually better to look at than damage. So damage is looking at your attack, crit damage, and crit chance multiplied. So that means if you don't have capped crit chance, then this is going to be different than McD. If you have capped crit chance, it's actually the same exact as McD. However, for McD, all it's looking at is your attack and crit damage, assuming that you're crit. So a character like Charlotte, she's only going to have like 23% crit chance. So you don't really want to look at damage because it's going to be absurdly low. And if you sort by damage, you're going to get a lot of builds that have high crit chance. So you actually want to look at McD. And I would say you should do this for most characters because this is just assuming you're going to crit. So a character like CDOM also, if you're not sorting by McD, you're going to get really low numbers. So some of these others, you can look through here. There's all sorts of different things you can sort by, but I think these two are by far the most important to look at. And then we get to substat priority. So this is actually pretty important to use to prioritize what stats you're looking for on the character. So a character like Charlotte, we're just looking for attack, defense, health. We only want a little bit of speed, and crit damage, right? I'll put it at 2, actually. This is basically what we're doing right here is we're hard prioritizing these stats that we have here, selected. And then this thing is looking at the top 25% of gear that have these stats. So this is to basically narrow down what we're looking at, because if you look over here, this is the amount of permutations we're looking through. And if you have too high permutations, your CPU is going to get cooked and it's going to take forever. So you really want to narrow down what you're looking for when you're trying to optimize these characters. Then you want to set your accessory main stats to be things that, theoretically you actually would have or could be useful. And it also helps you narrow down a lot of stuff. So on Little Queen Charlotte right here, or no, regular Charlotte, excuse me, I'm looking at crit chance, crit damage, attack percent, health percent. Do I even have some of these? I don't know, but these are theoretically the ones that I could use for a neck. Pretty much the same thing for ring, attack percent, health percent. I would never use flat health or flat defense. Defense percent. And then the boots are speed, attack percent. I don't know why I have some of these selected, actually. Let me just remove a few of those. So speed, attack percent, health percent. There we go. And I want to make sure that she's on immunity. Now, I could do something like have it as lifesteal and immunity, something like that. But I don't really have amazing lifesteal sets, even though it's one of her best sets to use. So I'm just going to prioritize immunity. By just putting immunity set, it means I want to hit all these stat breakpoints without specifically using speed sets. So maybe I'll have another set that I can hit those points with and it'll be even better. So I'm just looking for immunity. That's the most important one for her. So now we pretty much have got everything selected except for the last thing where I just want to take away some of these characters. But I'm not going to do that at this moment, just as a demonstration. So first we're going to start. And so as you can see, we're getting an absurd amount of results. This is many more than you would normally want. So let me just cancel right here to see what we have. So the McD that we're hitting is we're getting to about 11,000. And so this is 321 crit damage and 3,600 attack. So those are some pretty serious damage numbers. And honestly, the defenses are pretty decent as well. If you look at the EHP, so McD is 11,000 right here. Look at the EHP right here. We're at a nice, cool 80,000. So that's actually not too bad. But that's the bare minimum of what we were looking for. So what we could do is we could actually filter this and say, you know what? We actually want to get a little bit tanker. So let's put 85,000 McD. And then we hit the filter button. And that'll remove all the ones that are below. So we're still sorted by McD here. So we're looking at 11,000, which is 3,600 attack and 310 crit damage. But now you'll see we have a little bit more defenses right here. So we could also sort by EHP. We could do the reverse and say, okay, this is the EHP. Now let's up the McD, right? we could say like, okay, well, I don't want to look for ones like this. I want to look for ones that have 11,000 MICD. And then you hit filter, and here we go. Then this would be the first one, right? And it's saying it would take a sword off of Carrot. She already has this body armor on, actually. It would take this ring off top model Luca, and these boots off of my Spectre Tenebria. So then we see this build, and we're like, okay, 3,573 attack, some pretty good defense and HP at 181 speed, no extra crit rate, which is good. Charlotte doesn't actually want crit rate, and 310 crit damage. This is looking like a pretty solid Charlotte build overall for us. So we can also see it's on speed immunity. You know, we made sure that we were looking for immunity, and let's just say that this is the one we want. So then we would equip it, and after you equip it, you could choose to lock it. You'll see that there's a lock right here, for instance. Like, this is already locked on top model Luca, so we were looking at locked gear, so we actually can take it off. But if we didn't have locked items right here, this wouldn't even have shown up, or this. So just keep that in mind. Then we could equip and lock it, and once we do that, then if we scroll down to our Charlotte, it would show up right here. And also, it would add on to here. So if you look right here, these are past builds that I've actually attached to my Charlotte. So you can always swap the gear and then eventually go back because you have a saved build right here, and you could always remove it as well. Also, something of note, when you first add a character in, so let's say we add in Alexa, you know, we're going to deal with, let's say, doing Wyvern. So we would add in the artifact. This is actually important because this adds bonus stats right here for the character, so an extra 200 attack and 200 health. So that's kind of important. And also, you know, imprint. This adds stats onto the character so that when we're using the optimizer, it adds all that in and simplifies things a lot. You can also add in bonus stats, let's say from imprints or just other sources. And also, if she had an EE, you could add the stats in from that. So that's very important to add in so that you can actually get an accurate representation of the character that you're looking for. However, I'm not going to be building this character, so we don't have to worry about that. And then I can just remove the character, I believe, right over here. And yeah, pretty simple, right? So even though it seems like there's a lot to understand and it seems a little overwhelming at first, it's actually not too crazy once you start to get into it. And as you start working on it more and more, EHP will start making more sense, MACD will start making more sense. You can continually hit filter to like narrow down what you're looking for. But as a final note, there's a few other things that are kind of important. One is this upgrade thing tells you how many things need to be reforged. If you see right here, this helm and this neck were both being reforged. So when you're trying to build your characters for the first time in Fribbels Optimizer, you're probably going to have a lot of items that need to be reforged. And if you don't have a lot of materials, you could be in trouble. So you might actually want to kind of look at the upgrade tab here to make sure, like, maybe you want to go for this one because it has 0 upgraded. Now, it won't be the most optimal, however, it might be all that you can do at the moment. So you have to be kind of careful about those things. If you look at something also like EHPS or MACDs right here, either of these stats, this is actually looking at the MACD stat, you know, your damage stat, but also multiplied by speed for like kind of a efficient way of looking for a character that can get a decent amount of speed and good MACD. And EHPS is the same thing, looking for tank stats, but along with speed, right? You'll see it's 186 speed, which is faster than most of the others. So that's basically the simplest way to explain how to use Fribbels Optimizer. There's all sorts of other little things, like you have some settings right here. You can change the language right here. You can find more information, you know, if you just go into these places. But overall, it's a really, really useful tool. I highly recommend it. And this is how I've started building most of my characters nowadays. And it can help you understand not only how to build your characters more efficiently, but just how to upgrade gear in general. Because now you can look at gear and how it'll be reforged, for instance, just simplifies that kind of thing. You can compare your gear easier by looking at it in your Fribbels Optimizer and saying, okay, I have lots of, let's say, look, I have a lot of damage score gear that's around this range, so I can actually do with other gear that's around like 65 and higher. The thing is, gear score isn't the most important thing in the entire game, but it's a really good barometer for understanding if a piece is useful or not. For instance, if you're looking at a piece of gear and it's 59 right here, like this neck, 59 is pretty damn low. So unless it actually had really focused, useful stats for a specific character, not really going to be all that useful. But people who only pay attention to gear score are going to run into trouble. So let's say they have boots that have 45% health on them, but all the other stats aren't too great. That could be really useful Fallen Cecilia boots, but if you look purely at the gear score, it might look like a really junky item. But it's still a useful item, and it's actually good to have. It's really good to have. So you really have to be careful when looking purely at gear score for items, because you might throw yourself off and not upgrade items that are actually still going to be useful, etc. You always have to look at when upgrading a piece of gear what its potential could be. Like if, let's say, you got three 8% rolls from here, how good is it going to be? Is it going to be almost a perfect piece of gear? Maybe you should go for it. Because you have to manage your resources carefully. And so, like, for instance, this neck, I probably shouldn't have ever upgraded this. I probably upgraded this when I was a new player. But I still have it, and apparently I'm still holding on to it. 59 gear score for where I'm at is really, really, really low. I wouldn't really ever want to use this on a character. But that's just an example. So I hope that this Fribbels Optimizer guide helped, and I hope that it'll help you in the future. So thanks for watching.